Hello, my name is Alyssa Keller, and this is my presentation entitled Gradual Metamorphosis. I had been anticipating this trip for months. I bought myself a new suitcase and packed days in advance. It was my first trip abroad, and although I was scared of what I'd encounter overseas, I was ready. I wasn't really prepared, though, for the nerves that kicked in my Uber to the airport. I felt a tightness in my stomach I had never felt before. I felt anxious, excited, happy, and a little scared all at the same time. Once we landed in Amsterdam, though, I was nothing but excited. Barely sleeping on the plane should have left me tired, but I was a ball of energy ready to explore. I couldn't take in everything fast enough. We eventually made our way from the airport to the train station to Leiden Central to Hotel Minerva. We got our assigned roommates and started to get settled. Some people knew their roommate prior, but I did not. Shout out to Dr. Redmond for choosing someone as equally adventurous and spontaneous as me. We were a match made in Leiden. We encountered our first roadblock of the trip when our toilet started leaking within the first hour, but that was fixed without a hitch. The first of many 80-20 experiences we tackled together. As the sun set on a perfect first day, we all bonded over pizza and pasta and enjoying each other's company. We ventured to our very own castle on day 2. After coffee, that is. I think I can speak for the group when I say that we were all in awe that we were attending a conference specifically for us in a castle. Personally, I enjoyed Johnny's talk about school counseling in the Netherlands the most. It really put into perspective for me how important my future career is. After leaving the castle and hearing about the boat parade that evening, Sonia and I quickly freshened up and rallied the troops. We had so much fun that night seeing all the colorful floats, eating pub food, getting gelato, and exploring the food festival. My love affair with stroopwafels started on day 3 while exploring the farmer's market. We meandered around the tents, taking in all the amazing sights and smells before our trip to The Hague to visit the M.C. Escher Museum. As a self-proclaimed nerdy child, I'm not afraid to admit that I actually had M.C. Escher prints and even an Escher calendar growing up, but I did not expect to relate to him as much as I did. While watching the short film at his museum and walking through the exhibit, I saw myself. His pieces showing a gradual metamorphosis spoke to me. I feel as though I am currently going through a gradual metamorphosis. In the past few years of my life, I've had to change my perspective, as Escher did throughout his moves around Europe. He and I share a love for experiencing nature and enjoying its ability to rejuvenate the soul. His technique, called central perspective, in which he uses an imaginary point on the horizon for the basis of all measurements and proportions, can be seen in my life as my graduation from Mercer. Right now, it's kind of imaginary in the fact that it's not real until I make it real, and I base many of my decisions and life plans in getting there. Escher uses himself as a subject many times, which I interpreted as self-reflection. I too had to be introspective and realized that I was being hesitant and fearful about changing career paths. I did not want to commit myself to another multiple-year graduate program because of the time I lost with my first master's program. I had to realize that I'm the only one that's writing my story, and I needed to make a change, and here I am making that change. After having all that introspective time at the Escher Museum, it was nice to unwind over dinner with the group, followed by a trip to Olivier. On our free day, a group of us decided to take a boat tour, followed by a trip to the North Sea. Although we got on the wrong bus, we all embraced the 80-20 and went with it. After having a tiny but delicious lunch, Sonia and I ventured around Leiden, passing through Leiden University, the Botanical Gardens, the observatory where Einstein studied, and not forgetting to stop and smell the roses. A quick train ride brought us to Amsterdam on day 5. That city is unlike one I've ever experienced. It was pretty damn spectacular. The Van Gogh Museum came to life with the audio tour, and the Anne Frank House was beyond words. It was a touching memorial to a young woman who basically used expressive narrative therapy to cope with the tragedy happening around her. I only wish we had more time to take in that interesting city. While sitting on a street bench, eating takeaway Chinese that night after returning to Leiden, Sonia and I saw a bus headed towards Gouda. We hatched out a plan that night to use our free time the next day to get to the cheese. We got up early again and took 2 trains to Gouda. The town was quite different from any we had experienced yet. It was less busy and had a more homey feel and smell. The city square was almost empty when we arrived. We walked to the longest church in the Netherlands and gawked at the beauty of all its stained glass for as long as we could. We also visited the City of Gouda Museum and then the Gouda Cheese Museum before making our way back to Leiden for dinner with Kees and Annika. They welcomed us with open arms and told wonderful stories about their interesting life. Although the waiter didn't capture the clearest picture, you can tell we're having an amazing time. Sonia and I finished our night out with exploring an old fort turned city park in Leiden and chasing sunsets and gelato. A strong Dutch coffee was needed for our early trip to Paris. After a few train rides, though, we were there. After settling into our snug little room in Hotel Saint-Honoré, we headed out to our Notre Dame and literary tour. Seeing all the amazing architecture and learning about all the thinkers that came from this city was a wonderful experience. Day 8 started with a 10-mile trek around Paris before noon. Sonia and I set off at 7 a.m., destination unknown. We walked along the Seine and ended up at the Arc de Triomphe. We realized that there was a possibility we could experience the catacombs before noon, so we booked it across town, only to find a line longer than Anne Frank's house. We quickly remembered 80/20 and got some shopping in on our way back to the hotel. The Louvre was next on the agenda, and the vastness of it blew my mind. I tried to remember the article we read and not to rush, but I wanted to see it all. Eventually, though, I sat down and focused on a piece that really spoke to me. Our last full day in Leiden started with a delicious breakfast on the canal, followed up with group processing. We were all blown away with Stiana's pipes and touched by everyone's stories. We all had one last lunch together and bonded over this wonderful experience. On the final night, while going through all my pictures, I thought long and hard about which character I related to most in the warmth of other suns. Anyone who knows me knows I'm not too fond of my job. I love helping people, but police dispatching is, in the words of Robert Joseph Pershing Foster, a more complicated universe than he had imagined. I initially got into the field because I wanted to work my way towards detective work. Since starting this career in 2014, the world of policing has become even more dangerous and unpredictable than in the years before. The hatred for the police was rampant, and my dispatch center was getting daily calls at one point about how horrible we were. As you could probably guess, I was torn. I had wanted to work in this field for years, but I started loathing it. Why did people have to be so difficult when all I was trying to do was help them? I'm sure Robert Foster felt similarly when he was rejected in his profession after he worked so hard to get there. I had to reassess my situation and my long-term goals just like he did. After some soul-searching and talks with people close to me, I decided to take a risk and apply to another graduate program. There were so many factors that would have to work out for me to be able to complete the program. I had to find one that works with my complex work schedule because money was an issue. I was living in a new city, about to buy a home for the first time, and quitting wasn't an option. I felt similarly to Robert Foster when he started working for Golden State Mutual Life Insurance. He needed the money, and he had no choice. He was better off than most new arrivals in the South who didn't have his credentials, so he made himself grateful for the $750 he got for each exam and for the extra $250 for the cup of urine. I tried to make the best out of the situation, as Robert did, and I worked my 12-hour shift, then commute across Atlanta for class a few times a week. I know it's hard now, but someday, maybe I'll be counseling a famous person's child. Thank you all so much for making this trip one that I'll remember for the rest of my life.